Xenoblade Chronicles is a series on the up and up. From a promising start back in the time of Xenogears, to the Xeno Saga trilogy not performing well enough. Xeno as a series is one that has always been identified by its continuing ability to try and find its foothold, and every time when it might just do so, it slips and falls back down, only to come back up with a bit of a rebrand and a new backing. From Square Enix with Gears to Bandai Namco with Saga to the present Xenoblade series by Nintendo, Xenoblade Chronicles had a lot to prove when it first came out. The Wii was an extremely well-sold and received console, but the problem is, most people bought a Wii for a more casual experience, propped up by its standardized motion controls, so selling a fully fledged RPG was a bit of a tough sell. I mean, it sold okay overall, but it was by no means one of Nintendo's upper echelon franchises. But sometimes success is not marked by the profit made, but by the road that it sets. Xenoblade Chronicles would introduce many concepts and philosophies that would become cornerstones to one of Nintendo's fastest growing franchises. But how did Xenoblade Chronicles achieve this? What story did it tell? And how did it tell one of the greatest stories ever told so effectively? Well, that's why we are here today, people. For with one small step, we cast our gaze to beyond the sky to uncover just what makes Xenoblade Chronicles tick. We begin our journey. A game I really loved when I first played it on its definitive edition for Switch, but grew to truly cherish with my subsequent New Game Plus playthrough. Let's embark on this wild, wacky, emotional tale and analyze Xenoblade Chronicles. Welcome to episode 1 of the Chronicles of Xenoblade. Xenoblade starts off with a world-based story introduction. We get a bit of narration as we view the titanic battle between the Bionis, the titan of organic life, and the Mechonis, the titan of mechanical life, that was once waged thousands of years ago. These two titans are the setting upon which this epic story unfolds, which is totally a line I didn't get from the back of the box, why'd you ask? Now, I fully believe Xenoblade 1 has one of the greatest and well-paced introductions in all of gaming history, and I personally consider the introduction to range from the beginning of this cutscene to when Shulk and Rein set out later on. It's long, but to me it frames the world in such a special way, while putting most of the pieces on the board in a great and engaging way. So we transfer from this giant Titan fight, which is such a great hook by itself, to another amazing hook for new players, the Battle of Sword Valley. We're full adrenaline to start off, people, and we zoom in as the Homs, basically just humans from the Bionis, are getting absolutely thrashed by the Mechon, the robotic beings of Mechonis. But then the Giga Chad himself, Dunban, comes into focus as he wields a unique blade called the MONADO. Its red coloration and bright blue blade contrasting against the bleak and dark visuals of this nighttime battle, emphasizing its and Dunban's importance. And after watching the Homs barely being able to do any damage to the Mechon, and the Mechon themselves tearing through the Homs like a hot knife through pig crap, Dunban comes in and says, "It's okay. Hey, let me solo it," and just cuts down Mechon like he's playing Diablo or something. Just with this scene here, we understand the importance of Dunban, and especially the MONADO, because it's doing something extremely important, actually taking down Mechon and turning the tide of battle. Dunban rendezvous with Dixon. Basically, what if a 60s hippie had a Final Fantasy VIII Gunblade, and Mumka, our resident selfish coward. There's an obvious connection between Dixon and Dunban, but Mumka feels like he's on his last legs in this dynamic. And when he eventually runs away, he gets absolutely clowned on by the Mechons, and we never see him again, totally. But over the course of the fight, we see the MONADO almost eat away at Dunban. It's not something that comes naturally to Dunban, it's rather quickly becoming more and more of a burden for Dunban to wield the MONADO as it continues to shock him. But Dunban rebounds and says that he has that dog in him, as he goes for one last charge against the Mechon, as the camera pans through many of the zones we will see later on. Now, this is one of the most underrated aspects of Xenoblade 1's introduction, in my opinion, and it's a method we will revisit later on, when Shulk wields the MONADO for the first time. The game gives us a glimpse of what's to come, and shows us many of the zones we will get to later, but they are done very quickly, and what this does is plant little kernels of memories in us, so that when we get to these zones later on, we have a little pang of memory for them. And for a game predicated on the use of the MONADO as a means to slightly spoil what's going to happen to raise the stakes, having this feeling happen for the player and shows little snippets of what's to come, but overload the player with information so we're not going to remember everything consciously, is an excellent way of subconsciously getting that feeling across. A year passes and the pace slows down drastically. We focus now on the main protagonist of the game, Shulk, as he's scavenging Mechon corpses for parts. This will become one of Xenoblade's greatest strengths early on, being able to introduce characters quickly, effectively, and largely naturally. We already know that Dunban is a brave, badass soldier who used his Monado as a means to carve humanity's path forward. Dixon was the spirited friend and Mumcar the selfish idiot, but Shulk here relies more on his intellect. He's curious and is a researcher overall, studying the aforementioned Monado to uncover any secrets the mystical blade may wield. We are introduced to his muscle-headed friend, Rhine, who seemingly has a big heart, and we are introduced to their dynamic as they catch up and Rhine saves him from a giant enemy crab. While Shulk works as a researcher, Rhine works in the Defense Corps alongside Colonel Vanguard, who whooks him into the ground. The dynamic duo return to Colony 9, and we see that all in all, it's not a big place, but its most imposing structures are all defensive turret installations. It's a defensive stronghold, first and foremost, and humanity has survived however it could in this location. It's not big or grand, but it works, and its seclusion is part of the charm. It's a beautiful spot with the peaceful waterways underneath and the grassy fields and beaches. There may only occasionally have falling debris come down in which the turret have to lay a smackdown on them. It's guarded by its high mountains surrounding it, but is your picturesque RPG starting zone. And within this little slice of life section, we are introduced to the character of Fiora, a childhood friend to Shulk and Rhine who shares a quite obvious romantic interest with Shulk. Fiora also happens to be Dunban's sister, who is nursing him back to health after the Battle of Sword Valley from a year prior. Dixon has taken up a bit of a teaching role for Shulk, as he mentors him as Shulk studies the Monado, while Dixon screws off sometimes to go on a bit of an adventure. And it is here where characters start to fall under their generic trope role. And this is by design. They introduce characters in ways that largely feel natural, and slip in exposition through the simple banter these characters share with one another. Shulk is your plain RPG protagonist, who dreams big and happens to have some really powerful magical sword that he will surely have to take up to save the day, accompanied by his dumb friend who has a heart of gold and is the brawn of the operation, alongside his childhood friend who is the MC's main romantic interest. The game establishes these roles with Shulk's introduction and scene with Dixon in the lab. Fiora's role is established when she delivers Shulk his lunch and talks to Dunban, and Rhine with Shulk's introduction and idiotically taking up the Monado in the lab, which causes it to go off and wreck a bunch of equipment. It is also in this scene we get a little bit more with Shulk. We learn his emotional intelligence is about as empty as the Grand Canyon. He's hyper-focused in on solving the Monado, and applies cold logic to his day-to-day life, like not bothering to ask Fiora if she's alright, because he knew the Monado cannot damage organic life, ignoring the fact that this makes it look like he doesn't care about Fiora, who subsequently gets angry. And whenever Fiora prepares food for him, he largely just says they taste good or taste delicious, not going in on the details, which to Fiora can make that effort that she put in seem kind of redundant, if it's not noticed. But it's also in this scene, where Shulk goes to put the Monado back, that the Monado activates. And we are seeing brief scenes using foresight that will happen way later on in the game. We have no context and no way to really remember these moments, because they happen very quickly and back to back, which elicits a very similar feeling from when the game panned between all the different zones in the Bionis earlier on. When we get to these scenes eventually, we'll feel a little bit of nostalgia because, hey, we have a little kernel of memory for these scenes. That is an effect that the game is trying to establish here. And once Shulk puts the Monado away, questions what that was, it also teases, hey, the Monado has a few secrets up its sleeve still, that may not just involve the glass panes. There's many secrets to the Monado we just simply do not have. And because Rhine messed up at work earlier, Vanguard is having him go fetch some ether cylinders, which has the crew travel through Tefra Cave to reach an outpost containing a shocking amount of ether cylinders. The crew wanders around this ancient alien location, not from Homs or Mechon origin, and they wonder what ancient civilization could have built this place. That's totally not the High Entia from later on in the game, as they are attacked by enemies that we totally don't see in the High Entia tomb later on in the game. And what this scene does is help flesh out the world and the backstory, and add a sense of organic mystery. The world isn't just, or at least wasn't, just Harms and Mechon. There was something else going on here. There's some history to this world. Someone left these ruins. Chapter 1 of Xenoblade Chronicles sets up a lot to be expanded later on, and establishes many mysteries for you to uncover, including the alternate powers of the MONADO, and who left these ruins, and who leads the Mechon, and why this war started to begin with, and also, where did the MONADO even come from? That's what Chapter 1 is really trying to accomplish here. It's asking questions, and framing certain characters into certain generic tropes, so that Chapter 2 can sucker punch you. Heck, the game even teases gameplay mechanics later on. We know from the intro that the MONADO is capable of dealing damage to the Mechon, but with this scene with Shulk and Dixon in the lab, we know that the glass, where the symbols appear, is multi-layered, so the MONADO likely has multiple other functions for each layer of glass. This teases not only possible story implications of the MONADO being a much bigger deal than just a Mechon 3-hole punch, but also that we may get a bunch of cool abilities to use later on, which ends up coming to pass. So right now, a bunch of stuff has been set up that is right in line with many generic RPG tropes. We got the stereotypical party, the love interest, the strong but dumb friend, a magical sword that'll inevitably be the answer to all of our problems, and a giant threat to deal with. Oh, and we even have 2 pseudo-teachers, or at least mentors to Shulk, with Dunban and Dixon, and the rolling green starting area where every day is like the day before. I'm sure nothing can go wrong, and that this entire story will progress in a very generic fashion. Yeah, and then the Mechon attacked, huh? And everything changes as Xenoblade plays its hand and utilizes every assumption you have made about the game to this point to its advantage. And next week, we cover the Mechon invasion of Colony 9, and how the game uses stereotypes and tropes to its advantage to subvert player expectations to tell a more compelling and engaging story. But I must bid you all an adieu for now. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, go play some video games if you can, and as always, I'll see you all next time. And hit the bell icon to be notified when I upload and stream in the future. Bye bye everybody, until we meet again.